So a lot of people do call me Ollie, like my wife calls me Ollie. But I don't feel it's very professional these days. As I've got old and boring, I've decided that Oliver is more fitting, and it's a more mature name.
Has more gravitas.
Yeah.
But you didn't add your middle name in there. Where's your middle name? Shouldn't it be like Oliver Tecumseh Crunk?
Yeah. Well, the whole thing about names, actually, the reason I say it is because I got so teased by about my middle name and my surname at school. When I first went to uni, I just told everyone I was Ollie for like 6 months. I didn't tell anyone any other name because I got sick of just being ribbed for my names, because I stupidly told my school friends what they were. And I may have told you this before, but like one of them is Paul, so fairly normal. But then the other one is Camille, Kamiel, which is the name of my Belgian great grandfather. But of course, school kids being school kids decided to call me Camel.
Sorry.
I got like, no, it is funny. Looking back, it is funny. But like, I had 6 years of Camel. I'm like, right, I'm not going to uni and I'm not being called Camel for 3 years at university. So,
well, I think we just have the cold open right there. Excellent.
Yeah, it's all set. All set.
Anyway,
I'm not going to go into my middle names.
No, you're going to have to now.
He made it up.
You think you were humiliated?
Come on, tell us.
So the Lockharts, one branch of the family, you're married with the McDonalds, right? So for a long time, they were known as the McDonald Lockharts, hyphenated. I had a grandfather. My grandfather was Ronald Lockhart. Ronald Gardner Lockhart. And so Christopher Ronald MacDonald, McDonald, not the Irish, the Scottish.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Sorry.
You're welcome.
You're telling people
win,
your kids clowned around with you about that. That's what you're telling us, right?
Chris, you win. You win. And by the way, that's the cold open right there.
Yeah, the thing is, he couldn't even bring himself to say it all together, right? He's like, oh, you have to figure this out on your own.
Oh, God, that was good. Yeah.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Consultants Saying Things. I am Chris Lockhart. We have a cast. We have Oliver Crunk, we have Phil Yanoff, we have Wendy Keene, and we have special guest, Jonathan Gibbard. And Jonathan is a business unit director. I hope I have that right, for sustainable infrastructure and operations at an energy company in the UK. The topic today, and the reason John is here, is we want to talk about sustainability in the consulting workplace or workspace. Opportunities maybe in that area, what it actually means, and all of the things that fit around that, right? Oliver, I'm going to pass it to you for a little bit more on this, because I kind of think, I know you've done a lot of thinking in this area, more than I have. So, give us the 2-minute version on this.
Yeah, no, and it's great that John joins us. So John and I work together at the consultancy that's now become Ricardo. As you just sort of introduced John, but for me, this is a really topical conversation, and I just want this to become more of a mainstream topic, right? I mean, I think the days of this being some sort of niche thing that maybe a small group of people are aware of has to go. This has got to be, woven into everyday life for us to really make meaningful change that we need to make. So look, I'm really interested in, clearly I've got a whole bunch of thoughts on this topic, and it's something I'm personally passionate about, but I suppose I left the specialist space that John still lives in. And so that's why I was really keen to get John perhaps to share his thoughts on the current state of the sort of sustainability and ESG kind of consulting space, and what is he? So John, what do you think is the kind of really important things that are happening in that world at the moment?
Well, but actually, before we do that, John, what does ESG stand for?
Environmental, social governance. So so whether we use that as a kind of top level discussion point, or whether we use sustainability as a discussion point, or decarbonisation or net zero, there are so many different things that are important to different organisations. And to answer Ollie's question, I think that's the really important thing here. So the world has really moved on over the last year in particular. And we are now seeing shareholder, stakeholder, consumer, staff pressure in a way that we have never seen before, and regulation to go alongside that. And obviously that's different in different countries, but maybe just think about the UK and Europe. We've identified that there's a climate emergency. The European Commission, the UK government, and others have set this target of net zero by 2050, and we would term the next 10 years the kind of the 10 years of implementation. People have actually got to start driving some projects forward. And so it's a really exciting time. Different companies are coming to talk to us about different agendas. So for some, it's decarbonisation, linked to the massive spikes in electricity and gas that we have in Europe at the moment, and that you suffered in the US over the winter. For others, it's actually about shareholders saying this is really important for our investment in this business. We want to make sure that this business exists in 15 years' time, otherwise we're going to take our money out. For some, it's that they won't get government contracts unless they have a plan for net zero. So in the UK, certain sizes of government contracts from this autumn will require the companies to submit their net zero plans alongside their tender. So it's getting really, really serious for organisations, and they're acting in a much more positive and progressive way than I've seen before. And so it's a really interesting space for consultants to now work in, one that is very, very, very busy and full of really interesting, exciting projects.
Do you see the spurring of activity in this space? Is it driven by sort of regulatory bodies, or is there this upswell of sort of corporate responsibility or something, right? Which way is driving the adoption of some of these?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Chris. I think it's both, to be honest. There's some chief executives, some investors who are now really attaching a kind of like, this is what we stand for narrative. There are others that are absolutely being driven by regulation. And if you're working in the supply chain of one of those companies who have made a big commitment, you're now seeing that come down to you through their procurement teams. So, a big supermarket in the UK, a big chain of supermarkets, will be pushing that down to their suppliers. Tell me how you're going to reach net zero, because the top company can't reach net zero without everyone in their supply chain taking that action as well. So it really is kind of filtering down at that level.
I could also share on that too. I think there's been some really exciting developments that also show sort of the corporate perspective on this. The Business Roundtable, right, which the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies in the States, I think it was in 2019, August 2019, they changed the purpose of a corporation from serving shareholders to stakeholders, which I think is an epic sign. Or we see CEOs like Larry Fink of BlackRock, his messages to the CEOs have gotten more and more rigorous. It was, purpose of a corporation. And I think the last one was around, what are your plans for net zero? So also seeing those things too.
There's a really interesting observation, I think, that I read recently that said investors investing in sort of sustainable and environmentally sound organizations have seen far better returns over the last few years than those that aren't considering that. And it's interesting, even myself personally, I've gone and reviewed my pensions and investments and have made sure that they are environmentally sound ones, or ESG kind of compatible investments. Because I read the other day, actually, the biggest shift you can make, one of the biggest shifts you can make, aside from how you consume and what you drive and how many flights you take, is to make sure that your money, your investments are aligned with your own ethical kind of values.
What's the current state of, I guess, I don't know how you term it, right? Consultancy in this area. What does it look like today? And, because I'll be honest, I haven't seen a sustainability practice in some of these large companies that we talk about frequently with all the big acronyms. I'm sure they're there, right? But if you're pitching a client, you don't always have the sustainability guys in there, right? Along with you. So what's the state of that now?
I mean, I'll just answer this one quickly on behalf of the Big Four organization that I used to work for. And let's just say that the sustainability unit is one of the fastest growing units in that firm. And what was really interesting is I was catching up with one of my intake into the experienced hires induction program from a few years ago. And I was catching up with her, and she was ex financial regulatory body, and she came into the firm and was doing financial regulations consulting. And last time we caught up, she said, "What's really exciting, I'm now moving into sustainability division." And so are lots of other people, because I think the firm has perhaps realized that the financial regulation wave has perhaps passed, and that's where a lot of their money was being made. And they've now looking to the future, and they now realize that actually, the whole ESG space is going to be massive already and will increasingly get larger. So that's the kind of big firm perspective. But I'm really interested in John's kind of take.
Yeah, I guess there's lots of ways I could answer that Chris's question, and so maybe I'll give a range of different examples. So, a lot of companies didn't hire during the whole of the COVID period. We grew from 500 to 650 over that period. So a massive increase in our staff numbers. We simultaneously have seen the number of incoming inquiries really increase. The number of people, attending webinars and marketing events really increase. We've seen the value of the salaries for the consultants with the specialist skills increase substantially as well. The kind of market rate. We've seen the charge rate with clients increase. We've had clients coming to us to say, we've tried 3 other organizations and they're all too busy. Do you have time to do our project? We need it done really fast. So there's a number of indicators which I think are really interesting. And, a lot of people, I think sadly, don't necessarily love what they do or the area that their organization works in. And here we have the benefit of working on projects that are making a difference in the world. And so we have attracted people from other sectors into the organization because actually they really want to work on an environmental project, not a defense project. And we're able to take people with complementary skill sets, across lots of different areas like program management or sales or marketing. And as Ollie knows, in the digital space as well, who would have been working on all sorts of different projects, and kind of really plug them into our organization and really help them get up to speed with this agenda very quickly, because, there's great technical people in our organization, as there will be in other specialist providers like ourselves.
So what does a sustainable project look like if you're selling it to a client? What is it? What are you doing? It's not an IT roadmap, right? What does it look like?
I mean, it's very, very different depending on the type of project. So I'll give you, again, a couple of examples. So thinking about a net zero project at the moment. So, establishing the organization's baseline. So looking at their current carbon footprint, so that's kind of mathematical. It involves lots of stakeholder engagement. It involves getting lots of data. It then involves speaking to the stakeholders at senior level, both internally and maybe outside of the organization, and understanding where they want to aim for. And then it involves technical engineering insight to look at the options. So, where do you want to get to as an organization? What are the assets you own? Where are your emissions coming from? Are they coming from the supply chain? Are they coming from transport? Are they coming from buildings? Are they coming from processes and manufacturing? And looking at the different options. So it's really very interdisciplinary teams that we often need to answer that question, because for that project, we'd be drawing transport experts, we'd be drawing engineers, we'd be drawing people who are good at kind of stakeholder engagement, workshopping, people who are good at kind of maths and kind of putting this footprint together and then kind of building that into an answer. So that would be, one example, and then a different example would be, company X has maybe done some of that work themselves, and now they want to move from feasibility to, detailed engineering, boots on the ground, digging up the ground, putting in plant X or Y, CHP, waste heat recovery, whatever it might be to kind of make that difference. And, within that, even that project, you might need economic skills to build a really kind of tailored business case. You might look at the kind of future of the energy pricing of the energy market. So there's loads of different kind of very technical skills that are needed depending on the client's problem that we're trying to solve, essentially.
Are you also seeing more demand and helping clients with trying to help them think through, I'm going to say strategy and embedding sustainability more, even to the extent that you help them maybe to recraft and reshape their product offerings in order to enable or sort of nudge their customers to be more sustainable?
If you have a business model that is very carbon intensive, and maybe there's new technologies that you can see coming down the line in 5, 10, 15 years, and you actually need to change your whole business model, then you're going to need to think from a circular economy perspective about how you do that. And that involves engaging with, your customers to work out how you can transform your whole business. So we're talking to one organization who has a very carbon intensive business at the moment, and they are exploring becoming a provider of energy services, of renewables installation and other things like that as a future. And we're kind of looking at that with them at the moment as a pilot. So you can absolutely see how that kind of thinking is really requiring organizations to look at really fundamental changes. The kind of Nokia example of going from, trees and sawmills to mobile phones and kind of now beyond. So that's absolutely happening, I think.
I mean, it's been fascinating, I think, since the pandemic. I think people have been looking at new business ideas, and my social feed, I don't know if it's just because of my preference of what I look at, but I'm almost inundated with these sort of circular economy type businesses, right? Like, let's reduce packaging by sending you tablets for your cleaning products rather than shipping whole bottles, or dishwasher tablets that are in recyclable packaging, or whatever it might be, right? I think there's been a whole wave of new startup businesses. So are you doing quite a lot of stuff with new, smaller sort of startups as well as, or is it largely the kind of large organizations that want to kind of change their sustainability footprint?
Yeah, so the circular economy kind of conversation is maybe a bit further out for many organizations, Ollie. It's not where the focus of the activity is, but there are quite forward-thinking organizations, and by choice or kind of just by interest, the Scottish government actually is kind of part of that agenda in particular. So we have a lot of circular economy related work in Scotland, both for smaller organisations that are funded by Scottish government and the Scottish government as a whole, which is great that we have that building track record in that area. And I think that will be a really expanding area, because once you've done the simple low-hanging engineering projects and the other things, how you get to net zero becomes increasingly complicated.
That is interesting. I also find very interesting that, I don't know if this is good or bad, Phil hasn't said a word yet.
I'm learning and keeping my dog from barking on you. No, I mean, yeah, I'm learning that bit, but I'm kind of curious, John, when you're working with companies, I mean, they're coming to you already motivated to make some sort of change. I'm kind of curious as to what is in their head, right? What are they trying to get done? And quite frankly, where do they go to pay for this, right? I mean, what are they looking for in terms of sources or resources to solve these problems?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, with energy prices rising as quickly as they are, gas and electricity, a lot of people are looking to to future-proof their business against those increasing price rises. So if you can make a 10, 20, 30, 50% reduction in your energy consumption, that makes a big difference to your bottom line. So some are funding that way. So, it's a capital expenditure that they're building over a multiple year payback. There are some great projects that can be done with very quick payback nowadays. If you're, thinking of setting up a new factory or a new building, you might be designing that in now from the outset. So instead of paying for a roof of some sort, your solar PV tiles are your roof. Or you're building a car park and you put a roof covering on it and put solar PV on it, and that gives you a kind of source of electricity. For others, it will be an immediate concern that they're going to lose business, so they have to invest in order to stop company Y going to another provider that's more sustainable, because those criteria are now becoming part of so many procurement processes. So that's driving it. Does that answer your question, Phil? I think there's no one answer. I don't think it
is one answer, but I just wondered what that market basket was. Because in this is, to do this is long-term thinking, but something had to bring it into the near term. Otherwise, we'll never find the money to make the change, right? So that's how I was trying to figure out what people are doing to do that. Yep. And I don't know if I'm early on this, Chris, but I'm kind of curious about people who are interested in being in this space or working in this space, because I think there's a lot of people today who are in the consulting space who are probably saying, I'm working on this or I'm working on that, but I doesn't really feel like I'm changing the world for the better. It sounds like there might be opportunity. You just described that you were getting bigger and that it was paying better than it had in the past. So it sounds like there's opportunities for people to get involved with this kind of consulting.
Absolutely. And I think it's reflecting on your transferable skills. In essence, what are you great at? What do you love doing? We talk often about playing people in position in our organization. So, having someone who loves running projects and programs, allowing our technical people to focus on doing the technical work, and someone else is really good at bringing that all together and maybe being client facing, or maybe it's someone with sales skills, who'd rather change from selling a software or a product and would like to sell consultancy or kind of associated products. So there's loads of different opportunities, and I think people starting with what are they great at, and how is that transferable into our space, and then have an open conversation with us or another organization about what that looks like.
I think there are ways to specialize, as you're saying here, but just to go back to some of the things that we were discussing earlier, this also changes the way we think about business, right? Just thinking about whether it's MBA school or university. It's like I know kids are learning more and more about sustainability younger and younger, but this closed loop design, right, and circular economy, that changes the way we look at things. So it's almost like everybody needs a layer of this. And Oliver, as you said right in the beginning, like this should ideally become mainstream thinking for everybody, not something sort of separate.
Definitely. And there's new technologies that we haven't covered. Hydrogen is going to be a massive thing in the UK and Europe based on the policies that we're seeing and the investment that we're seeing going into that. So if you're an engineering student coming through at the moment, do your dissertation, do your project on hydrogen, you probably walk straight into a job with ourselves or one of the big engineering firms, because that's a really useful skill set that lots of people don't have at the moment. So that's just one of probably a number of examples with kind of new technology and how that interfaces into the future challenges.
I'm going to serve the challenge function here. Isn't this just like better efficiency? Aren't they just efficiency plays? What's the sustainability part of it?
That's a good question. It definitely is an efficiency play, but I guess one of the tenets of ESG is the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and we haven't talked about the social side of some of this. So a number of the UN Sustainable Development Goals are about poverty, about diversity and inclusion, equality, and a number of other kind of themes about making sure that everyone in the world gets a kind of fair shot at life. And actually, so the UN Sustainable Development Goal agenda can sit alongside many of these projects. As you're reviewing your supply chain for its carbon impact, can you also simultaneously review it to make sure that there isn't slavery going on within that supply chain? Can you design your processes and maybe your supply chain to kind of reduce, certain bad and comparable kind of things that have happened in the past in your supply chain? That's, I think, a really exciting part of the agenda that takes it away from just those efficiency savings and environmental. And we're again seeing that, I think, coming forward. So, a lot of organizations are interested in life cycle assessment, understanding the carbon impact of a product. But then you also have social life cycle assessment, where we try to understand some of the social impacts of a product. And whilst companies are more focused on the environmental side at the moment and the carbon side of life cycle assessment, I think they will equally become more interested in the social LCA as well in the future.
Staying on the challenge theme, Chris, I know one of the things I was going to talk to John about is how I've seen some ESG projects feel like greenwashing, right? It's been, how can we make our corporate annual report? We've got to do an ESG section in it. How do we make that look as good as possible? So we'll play with the numbers. We'll maybe try and outsource some of our emissions to our supply chain so that we can make ourselves look amazing. Like, we've reduced our energy usage by 80%. We haven't really. You've just apportioned that to another part of your organization. Talk to me a bit about, how do you think there is still a fair amount of kind of greenwashing and kind of marketing and dressing up companies to look more ethical and sustainable than they really are? Or do you see most of the work in this space now being quite genuine about outcomes?
I think I see less of that than I did 10 years ago, Ollie. Definitely. I think the way to, as a kind of consumer or an interested party or stakeholder, the way to look at it is, when you read through a report, a company's annual report, do you see kind of glossy projects which talk about a lot of qualitative benefits, but not quantitative benefits?
Right.
Do you, alongside those projects, see a clear statement of ambition? So net zero by 2030, net zero by 2040, net zero by 2050. If I'm getting on my pedestal a little bit, I would say 2050 is too late.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in organizations that are talking about 2030 and 2040, because I think that's a better time scale to kind of work to. So are they talking about how they reach a target by 2030, 2040, 2050? Do they have a plan that they're laying out to do that? Are they tracking progress on that on an annual basis? Which kind of takes us into this kind of IT area and, making sure that we're not only talking about those glossy projects, and some of them are great and some of them raise profile and help to share best practice amongst industries and sectors and peers. But, are we also looking at how we're transitioning to this low carbon future? And if a company is doing that in their annual report, then I say there's substance behind what they're doing. If it's just about glossy PR photos and projects, then maybe they're still on the greenwash agenda.
Greenwashing. I love it.
That was the thing of saying, right, well, showing that I'm environmentally responsible does not mean printing my annual report on recycled paper. That's not it, right?
Yeah, and then still sending it out to 10,000 people hard copy. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
Let's talk about the metrics, right? Because we brought this up a few times. How if I have a sustainability set of initiatives going on, and I've got high expertise consultants helping me implement those initiatives, how am I measuring? What are the KPIs associated with this type of consulting and this type of delivery? Because the Gen X in me just says it's all about money, right? But maybe it's not, right? And I don't like, are the KPIs different in some way for a sustainability initiative?
I would hope that the kind of key metric that people are looking at is the carbon metric, the CO2 equivalent. So not just carbon, but picking up some of the other damaging fossil fuels like methane and others. So our organization is tracking that. Yeah, that should be the kind of key KPI.
Do you give your clients tools to help them measure this and track it, or how does that work?
Yeah. So often we build bespoke tools for clients around this. So, thinking in particular in the life cycle area, a company has a set of processes, for creating a product with a number of different inputs. And the more complicated the product is, the more inputs there will be. And, one can give the client a tool to think about their existing products and future products off the back of that kind of consultancy. There are a number of providers of environmental management systems, some big IT companies who are really helping organizations to collate all of that data, then to be able to do activity off the back of it. So there's a big IT space around a number of those types of organizations. There's some newer startups in that area where people are looking particular at kind of trying to work out emissions related to supply chain, where you don't have the carbon numbers and they're difficult to create, but maybe you've got some financial metrics and you can start trying to make some assumptions and therefore create a carbon footprint out of that. So yeah, there's a number of metrics, of kind of IT plays here, of data collection plays that are really important as people kind of track their progress.
So I can see the the sustainable consulting practice in PwC or whatever, right? Going and helping clients either for whatever the reason that they're doing it is, right? But to execute on these things, to do whatever they need to do in the carbon space or water or whatever it is. It seems to me also, though, that the consulting firms themselves should be applying some of the sustainability ideas to their operations, right? And so I use PwC simply because, they announced, right, well, everyone can work from home forever. Around 400,000 employees or whatever it is around the world. That seems like that's well, I don't know how to take it exactly, really. I don't know if that's just like, oh, we're green, or if it's a cosplay, or I'm not sure, but it seems like that type of activity that says, we're not just preaching it to our clients, we're practicing it ourselves, right?
I guess there's being slightly controversial, there's a question of, is it more efficient for everyone to work in one heated, air-conditioned office, or is it more efficient for everyone to be at home heating their own homes? There is an environmental kind of point.
It's a trade-off, isn't it? People forget this, don't they? They just think, oh, no traveling, but hang on, there's they say it's just pushing up one and pushing down another, probably.
Which is why all of this is often so complicated. I mean, there is a transportation saving, absolutely. But then I think it's then about, like, what are the other things that are going on? Because, if your partners are then flying first class to visit your clients on a regular basis.
As partners do,
As partners do. And Ollie has a lot of experience with this, I'm sure. Then
certainly not first class.
then your kind of CO2 quota that you saved in encouraging people not to come into the office gets burnt up very quickly with something like that as an example. So, we've got to see not just that work from home, let's save that transport emissions, but what are the other practices that these organizations are putting in place to discourage, short haul air flight and things like that.
And just to be perfectly cynical, complete the full cynical cycle, closed loop cynical cycle. I'll just pick on PwC again because we've been talking about that, right? But I'm sure internally, right, this initiative to have everyone work from home, it's like, great. Guess what, guys? We now don't have to heat the buildings and do all of this stuff. And we are now, look at how green we've become, right? When your point is they really just shoved the problem off into another area that may actually be worse, right? And I'm not suggesting that they have people work from home for sustainability reasons, but as an outcome of that, it seems like, they've taken it off their books kind of thing, right? And
I mean, isn't that what that was all about? Because in truth now, a third of their consultants are in giant RVs running across America, going from campground to campground. So yeah, I'm not sure. I understand what you're saying, Chris. And the thing is, this is a non-trivial problem, right? We just don't know how this is going to be dealt with. We don't know what this is. I mean, ideally we'd all be packed into cities. We'd look like the Matrix, like everybody'd be in a little tube, right? But that's just not what's going to happen. The question is, what are we going to do? And what can we do to kind of affect some good? And the thing is, there are some organizations that clearly, I don't know why this vision came to me. I know this is going to resonate with you, Chris, but it reminds me of that scene in Mad Men when Don Draper's out on a picnic with his family and he takes a tin can and tosses it into the weeds. Yep. And it's like, oh my God, today you look at that and you go, what the heck? Right? I mean, it's like, I can't even believe. But if you were alive in 1962, that's kind of what happened. That is kind of what happened, right? I mean, so I think that there's that point. So as we think about how do we make ourselves responsible, it's kind of these things are changing. You've got guys like John are actually reaching into organizations, and we've had laws and environmental programs, et cetera, come together in such a way that we're kind of getting used to this idea that maybe we ought to think about the world isn't an infinite resource. Maybe we ought to think about when we talk about, Oliver was talking about like making technology last, right? I mean, buying stuff. And I was like, oh my God, I've got 4 iPads sitting here on my desk. I mean, how many does one person need? And where does it go next? Where am I? And I'm planning on buying another one. What am I going to do with the 3 that are sitting here, right? Kind of thing. But I think this is a great moment for us to kind of get that and sort of think about it. And obviously, in these big organizations, it's a big lever, right? I mean, if we can make some changes there, the knob doesn't have to be turned a lot in order to make a big difference.
And trade-offs aside, to some extent, I think it's really good that these things are intertwined. So I invest in sustainability. I also get efficiency and cost savings, or I get to secure my supply chain, or I have a whole new set of customers and products and, markets available to me because we're at least sort of playing on the human motivation. And I think, again, trade-offs and greenwashing aside, the environment doesn't care why we do it. It just cares that we do it. And I think there's a bigger picture there that if we can leverage this for our benefit, I think we're going to maybe get a lot further in the end.
I think the opportunity here for the average cat on the ground, right, is, if you are a consultant and you're used to delivering IT strategy or whatever, right? Application rationalization, who cares, right? You're used to doing those sorts of things that are big, complex, types of engagements. And I think if you had that interest, this is a place where you could apply that type of thinking because of the complexity of the things that we're talking about, right? It's not just everyone work from home, right? It's and we'll call it a success for our energy usage.
It's a system of systems problem, right?
Systems, right? And I think I think architects might be actually really well positioned to be in this space. But you know what, John, we'll give you the final thought here on this. And if you want to plug anything, you can plug it. It's all right.
So I guess I'd pick up on that. What can the average cat on the ground piece do? If you're a consultant in an organization, whatever your role as a consultant, is there an angle for you to think about how your project helps this organization be more sustainable? You may have never addressed that before in your IT strategy or your business improvement project or whatever it might be. But now's the time to explore that with that organization and look if you can see some wider benefit than just the kind of the headline objective that you're going after. And I think if you can do that, that's brilliant for the world, full stop, and brilliant for that organization, full stop. But in that way, you can also start to build this kind of wider experience that you've got, and you'll make yourself more valuable, with the future that you've got in that area, or with a change into another organization like Ricardo. And I guess if anyone is, being motivated by this conversation and thinks now's the time for me to change sector, to do something a little bit different, then I would love to hear from people.
And where would they go to get in touch with you, John?
They would come to our website and get in touch with one of our recruitment team and ask for me specifically in doing that. And we're lovely to have a chat. Ricardo
Energy and Environment. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chris. Yeah.
Very good. Awesome.
Ricardo.com, right?
I think so.
Well, this has been fascinating. Listen, John, really appreciate you being here. This was a great conversation in an area that I don't think a lot of consultants typically think about as a growth area for their career and all that sort of stuff. So this is really great. I think the other really important thing we learned is that we're going to call him Ollie from now on.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
I have many names. Some of them aren't very nice, but these ones are fine.
That's awesome. Well, listen, appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Oliver, Phil, Wendy, and John. Appreciate it. Everyone, thank you for watching. And don't forget to, where is it? Subscribe. Up here? Is it up here? Is it over here? Wherever it is. Click the bell. You can hear all our new stuff when it comes out.
Subscribe and like.
Yeah, exactly. Subscribe and like. All right. Listen, appreciate it, guys. We'll see everybody next time.